You are listening to Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, a podcast where three women discuss horror movies from the silent era through the 1970s. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, and Anchor. Timely, topical, terrifying. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, and we are back on our Poe extravaganza, our Poe extravaganza. And we have moved on to episode 2, and we have paired it, so let me back up a little bit. Those of you who've been either watching the Netflix series or have watched it or are going to watch it, The Fall of the House of Usher, episode 2 on Netflix is Mask of the Red Death. Now, there is an old 1960s Mask of the Red Death movie starring Vincent Price, but that was actually our inaugural episode of Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls. So rather than give you a rehashed version of that, we decided to find other Poe stuff that we could tie it into. We could not find another version of Mask of the Red Death that was pre-1980s for this, but Betsy found a lovely The Fall of the House of Usher movie from 1928. It's silent and French.
Very
And
French.
Glad he did, because it's been on ever since reading about early cinema in the 1900s or 1920s and such, after World War One and the development of horror. This was on my list. So, and I haven't looked at that list in like 3, 4, 5. Okay, it was before the pandemic, so whenever the hell that was.
at least 5 years then.
Yesterday.
I will say that so it's free on Tubi. If you have ever taken French, you could probably read the cards and get the gist of it. I was able to, and believe me, my French skills are sorely lacking. However, if the gist isn't enough for you, or two, French is not in your repertoire on any level, or any of the Romance languages, because you probably could still get it if you had Spanish or Italian or Latin. There, Betsy also found a free version on YouTube where they translate in English,
Yes,
with a nice little French accent for you.
That's the one I found with translations and a new score as of 2022.
I was gonna say, I actually found even an additional one where it was not the guy reading it. There was one with a guy reading it, which was fine, and I watched it. But then I watched it again with just the translated. It was translated.
This one did not.
He wasn't reading it aloud.
I have to say, I liked all the versions of the scoring. I mean, I only saw the 2. I didn't get the 3rd translated version. I only saw the French version and the 1 translated version. But I thought the scoring they did on both times was well done.
Yeah, the one that we were listening to was a little more modern, but it was lovely. I mean, it fit the score really well. They had some really nice elements of like suspense and like eerie kind of atmospheric kind of noises and stuff.
That's what I was thinking about mine as well. The one that I watched, I was pretty pleased with what they dubbed over.
Yeah, I had no problems with it. Yeah, it's
and visually stunning. I mean, there's some like scenes where it's obviously kind of like a not great background, but for the most part, just the camera effects, the lighting, just gorgeous, very atmospheric.
Yeah, it is probably the closest adaptation I've seen to the book as well.
Yeah,
they did make some adjustments, but nothing truly significant. Like they changed his wife to his sister
to his wife.
Thank you. I almost got it.
No, I get it.
But fundamentally, it follows the storyline very closely, which is nice for once.
And they kind of alluded to in that one scene that their family tree was more a wreath than a tree. So I think they were kind of hinting at the closeness of their relationship too, even though they weren't coming right out and saying that this was a relationship between siblings or whatever. I think they were kind of edging it, but not saying it outright, because 1928.
Yes, yeah, it never would have passed the censors.
No, but
keep me honest. So, like, I kind of re-glanced through the story itself of the Fall of the House of Usher. Now, I saw where it referred to him as his twin sister, but I guess there's supposed to be an implication that the twin sister was also supposed to be his wife in the actual book as well. But I didn't really get that in my quick rereading of it.
I would need to read it a little closer myself.
from what I remember, and I did a paper on this in college, so it's been a minute, but I did do a paper on this in college. From what I remember, they live as husband and wife, but they are siblings.
So that
Yeah.
could be implying an incestuous relationship.
Yes, it was an
Okay.
implied incestual relationship. Yes.
Okay. Thank
So,
you.
and I don't know that it actually came out and was like they straight getting at it. But
No.
I think at one point, like he sees him sneaking out of her room or her sneaking out of his room, that kind of thing, or they woke up in the same room together when the guy was there, if I remember correctly. So there was like this
An
is
implication.
odd and wrong and a little weird. So it was a lot of implication, but
I
not.
yeah, well, it's certainly dealing with French impressionism,
I
impressionistic painting.
will say a rather weird, yeah, variation they went with the 1928 movie is they sort of kind of, I don't know, kind of threw in a portrait of Dorian Gray kind of element where he's obsessed with, well, apparently all the male ushers get obsessed with
Yeah.
painting their wives. And as he's painting his wife, she's like fading more and more and then passes out. And then there was a little bit where he was also supposed to be obsessed with hypnotism and he was insisting she wasn't dead, if
I
I
was just
recall.
going to go into the portrait part that you mentioned, Jenny, because they did that very well. I like beautifully so, because you could see her fading and fading as he's getting more frantic and obsessed with this portrait.
And
And
even that first scene of him painting, when she's
mhm.
kind of standing and watching him idly, like hauntingly in the background, and he touches the canvas and she goes, and then
Mhm.
like walks out of the room, and you're like, oh, there's
Dead.
something going on here. It was really well done though. Like,
I
Yeah.
I thought too the actress did. I mean, yes, since it is a silent film, you have to rely more on your theater and emoting. But wow, did she emote beautifully. Oh my gosh. She got that lovely look of, to me, it was trapped despair. I don't
Hmm.
know about what you took it, but that's what I took it as. Oh.
Hopelessness. Yeah, for sure.
hopelessness,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yep.
Well, I guess we should
Ennui.
back up a little. Maybe you've never read the story, and maybe your only exposure to the Fall of the House of Usher is this Netflix series, which, in a way, it does follow the storyline, but it's in pieces and bits in different areas. So, the long and short of it is, you start out with a long lost friend who's traveling to the House of Usher because he was Roderick Usher sent him a letter saying, "Look, I miss you, my friend, and you're my only one and only true friend, my best and only friend," basically, he says. And I'm afraid my wife, or no, sorry, I'm afraid my sister, confusing things here, is dying of some unknown malady that nobody is baffling doctors, and I fear that as soon as she's gone, I will soon follow. So please come out. So the guy does. He, sits with his friend Roderick, gets the background story. He catches a glimpse of Madeline, possibly in that scene that you were referring to. And you know, Roderick explains the situation. They realize that Roderick and Madeline are the last of their line. They have no children, whether together or with other people. And also it's interesting, they make reference to the fact that Roderick is quite possibly in modern terms on the spectrum because he has issues with noises. So a lot of them are very rattling to him and he can't handle them, and textures of clothing. He can only wear certain kinds and stuff. And these are indicators. So I thought that was interesting. But the story goes on and Madeline dies and he insists that she doesn't get put in their family vault right away, but kept in the house in the vault downstairs. But they still lock her up in it like it's a dungeon, and she's in a casket and everything. And of course, it culminates during a storm where you hear knocking noises, and they're pairing up with a story that the friend is reading to Roderick to keep him calm. And of course, there's bursting through wood noises and creaking noises. And the next thing you know, there's Madeline at the door who's, broken herself out of the coffin. And Roderick admits that he knew for some time that she was buried alive in there and didn't go.
And just leaves her there.
And then she dies, he dies. There you go. Like you could already see that there's some of that theme in the first episode with the way the mother was buried and comes up, and then she, walks her way to the guy who's the father of her children, and then kills him and dies on top of him again. Well, dies. again.
It's,
So that is
it's a Poe story. Everybody but the narrator dies.
pretty much. Oh yes, and then after the ushers die, the house crumbles in upon itself and poof. So
Falls
you
into the
will
north.
see these elements throughout the different episodes of the House of Usher. That's
Yeah.
not really spoiling anything if you're familiar with the story. It's where they come up and where they show up, and the other post stories that get mixed in that makes it fascinating and how they've modernized
Absolutely.
it.
Well, and there's a reason it's called Follow the House of Usher. They are Roderick and Madeline, which is the name of the two characters. So they obviously mirrored them after these stories, but
They're
the
twins, like they
actual
were in the story, and
yeah, but the actual story is very depressing. It's Poe. It's Poe.
Yeah,
not
they
known
do
for his
a good job,
stories.
I think, with putting the eeriness of his writing into the series, the modern series.
Mhm.
Because you'll get little touches of it here and there of the story revealing itself. Like, I mean, it, and sometimes they're really blatant to me, but they're still
Yeah,
out there. You know, the giving bits, like you in the second episode, you find out how Prospero dies. You realize why Roderick is so urgent on the medical device
yeah. Well, but
trials.
we're jumping ahead, so we probably don't want to go.
So with the 1928 one, I really thought that the gothic of it was so good. In fact, when Seth and I were watching it, he's like, I think this is better gothic than the like 50s Dracula was. Like it's way more atmospheric. Those moments when they're sitting at the table and the like curtains would start to move in the background and they would show that line of curtains moving like someone's moving behind the curtains, like it was so atmospheric and so dark and like haunted, and you're like, oh, this place is not good. Like something
Or
wrong
the
in this house.
They had some similar shots where it looked like books falling off shelves, like it was
Yes.
decaying as you were watching it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really well done.
And then you got the additional insight. There's something even more manic about Roderick Usher than originally seen, because literally he invited this friend over and then he kicks him out of the house because he wants to work and paint
Yeah,
his wife without anybody in there. So he like sends him out into this cold windy day, like a walk after dinner would be great for your constitution. Go walk.
take a walk, get the fuck out.
Bye.
I know I
And then
said
you
I
have,
wanted you here, but that was yesterday and I've changed my mind.
and now you're here and it's just annoying. So
I think we can all relate to that.
it's true. It was
The
nice
me
seeing
who
you for 10
invited you here
minutes.
was not the me of today. Yesterday me is
Welcome
not
in.
the same person. Sorry.
Now go. Well, the really pretty. So even the coffin, like they just after Madeline passes out and or dies or is in a death-like coma, however you want to look at it, it's
Or all
just
these things.
gorgeously ornate coffin that they bring in, and it's really just fun and like it's because there's like you have the guy who's trying to walk it upstairs to like take it to where Madeline is to stick her body in it, and then you have Roderick stopping him, and then the butler and the friend trying to stop Roderick from stopping the guy. And it shouldn't be
Yeah.
comedic, but it is. Just this weird little like, okay. And then, of course they put her in it, but her wedding dress is like spilled out of it, even with the lid closed. And it's just really, yeah, very haunting. Then they take it over this whole boat ride and all this thing that they just lock her in a cave mausoleum that's across the lake and over the
Killed.
woods. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
still this woman claws out, gets back over. I don't know if she swam. It's my sense of humor coming in. I'm sorry, but yeah, it's just a really worthwhile watch, I'd say. And like
yes.
even if you don't get any of the cards and stuff, you'll get the movie anyway. It's very much.
Well, and my only negative comment on it, and realistically, it's not even more negative, more just a statement of fact. They could have maybe used a couple more intertitles. However, I
Yes.
don't think the story suffers at all
No.
because, yeah, and word of warning, if you are looking for, a really dive into the picture as if you were, there seeing the action, this is not the film for you. Uh, as I looked up some of the background of it and whatnot, there was a quote about French impressionistic cinema that really resonated and actually was just the perfect example of this is that the directors were more interested in the visual narrative than the story narrative. And that is so on display here. As I said, not that the story suffers, you still know it, you still follow it, but they rely so much on the visual, on those little touches, like Betsy, you mentioned when he's painting and the wife does the little motion where it's like she feels it on her face. They're connecting it with tiny gestures here and there.
Now, interestingly, which this is IMDb trivia, of course, so please take with a grain of salt. It says Louis Brunel, who was the assistant director, quit the picture after clashing with producer director Jean Epstein over Epstein's decision to basically ignore Edgar Allan Poe's story, which I would say he did not ignore the story. He flourished, but it's still pretty true to the story. So it might just be that Louis Brunel is very curious when he came to Poe
Yeah,
and couldn't handle the portrait of Dorian Gray being thrown in there, I guess.
maybe that was it because honestly, I felt like it was, like I said, a really good adaptation. So
Yeah, so I agree. So I thought that was kind of an interesting piece of trivia. Again, though, IMDb um, is not like the source base of fact, but it's kind of got little fun things that make you go, I wonder.
Yeah, I thought it
So
was interesting too that it's like on a lot of people's like top films of all time. And
yeah,
I think that's from the artistic vision of it because it is, again, artistically beautiful to look at. And the actors, even like the actors playing Roderick and his friend, and they all had very expressive faces. And like the guy who played Roderick at times, I was like, his eyes are crazy right here. Like just straight up crazy. He does crazy eyes great. Good for
he
you,
almost had
Roderick.
that. He almost had that Dwight Fry crazy eyes.
Yeah, he was like, no. But there was one scene like right when his friend arrived and they like focused in on him. And I was like, his eyes are beautiful. This is a black and white film. And I can see that his eyes are beautiful. Like, that's how expressive he was. They were like, just you can tell that he like had gorgeous eyes, that he was someone who could very well emote with his eyes. In one, like the first like boom shot of him, I was like, oh, well, there we go. I have no idea who this random Frenchman is, but obviously he had gorgeous eyes. Who knew? But I honestly really enjoyed watching it. It's very good.
If they were releasing it today, it would definitely be an art house film. Uh, Big time. It would succeed in that venue, I believe.
I think most silent films are kind of that way because
yeah.
they were relying so heavily on the visuals to tell the story that they are so visually rich because sometimes they were shown without any music whatsoever, depending on what kind of theater you could get into, or sometimes just a real quick piano accompaniment. Not all of them had those sweeping orchestral scores. So it's I think, kind of just part of the time. But that's why I think that silent horror is so wonderful and beautiful to watch because it does have those visuals. And you're like, sometimes I'm watching them, like there were scenes in this that I was like, I don't think that people could do this practically today. And they were doing this in 1928. Uh, it's fascinating. Or like the scrim shots were bad, but I'm like, but for 1928, putting
Yeah.
that putting that
Mhm.
fog in front of a scrim to show the house,
Mhm.
like, okay, there are people who can't do that today with like CGI and do it as well as the fog lifting. It was
Mhm.
interesting. It's interesting to watch and see. And you can really see some of the influences like later works probably took from this work. Because I was thinking of it's like the 1930s, 40s French Beauty and the Beast. I think it took some from this with the decaying house, with the books like falling down and stuff.
I
I
think
could
you're
see an
right.
influence there because that is very much that as well, where you go through that house and the house is decaying, and then you get to the beast and he's like this wild thing. So I think you can see kind of influences in it. But I thought, as far as being a 1928 movie, I thought it was very, very good.
With the lighting that specs they came up with and superimposing images and such, I'm like, I mean, I know they do that now, and I know that, I don't want to say it's easier, but there's a lot of programs and stuff that help do that stuff, and there's after editing and stuff that they can do stuff with now. But they literally had to do it practically in the moment. You know, I mean, like they obviously they had editing, but
Yeah.
the
I
level of
mean,
skill it took to do that. You know?
and if you think about it, it feels like it was like a wild west of cinema in that time, that you were only limited by what you could do, by what you could experiment with and try and think about. You know, your imagination is what might stop you because you're
Right.
like, well, let me try this and see what happens, and you'll get that effect. And that's why I think some of the special effects in this hold up wonderfully well for being almost 100 years old.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. We got
Apparently
everything we want
also
on this? Oh, sorry, go
I
ahead,
was
Betsy.
just
You have some more?
apparently also it has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes if you take that into account. So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, all
Um,
those critical reviews were positive. There was nothing that was we hate this
yeah,
film or this sucked or yeah. I
yeah.
think even Siskel and Ebert agreed on
I was
it.
gonna say,
I think of the silent films I've seen, it's my favorite.
I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
So yeah.
All
So
right, moving on.
so modern day Fall of the House of Usher with episode 2, Mask of the Red Death. Just one little prelude, you know, we're kind of picking up with Prospero after his idea for like basically the exclusive club slash
Sex club.
whorehouse. Yeah,
Yeah, the sex club.
got horrendously shot down by his, you know, father and auntie, who basically said, "Okay, so we're selling blowjobs and cheap scotch. Okay," and there we go from there with our modern day Prospero and his Mask of the Red Death, which I personally thought was clever.
I enjoyed it.
I
But I also hated this Prospero probably even more than Vincent Price's Prospero, to be honest.
This is Price's Prospero had just delightful campy wickedness. This guy, uh, oh gosh, little obnoxious, scrawny fuckwat.
Entitled asshat.
Yes.
he's such a fuckboy, pardon me, but Jesus.
Even a good one because it's like, good Lord, put some bulk on before you go for that, you know?
But that was the thing too. Like, I mean, and this is probably just an aesthetic. It means here there, but like one, he's so young. It's just
Yeah.
not
I,
appealing. And
oh,
two,
yeah.
his aesthetics, it just looked so frail to me. Like, what are you gonna do with that? I mean, yeah, it's young and it might have stamina, which a lot of young don't. It has more like energy versus stamina, but I'm like, he looks
Yes.
so breakable. You know, like you couldn't even ride that. It would snap like a twig.
Yeah.
And like, ooh. But anyway,
Ew.
I'm nothing against the guy. I'm sure people love him. The actor's probably a wonderful kid. It didn't show
Okay.
to me as a sex symbol that he was probably supposed to be.
I am an old and I am not into that.
Yeah.
That's it.
I know. It
It might
was,
meet your younger aesthetic. So my apologies if it does, if you're younger and that's your thing.
Yeah. The guy I find very attractive comes in a later episode.
Yeah.
it
But
does.
yeah. And then there's that personality that makes it worse. Like that
I was gonna say
character.
because he's very much like a spoiled rich kid. I'm used to getting my way. I pay for all
Shallow.
my friends' stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
shallow.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
and I
stick a fork through your neck because I think you ate my expensive Gall's eggs. You know, I
Yeah.
just yeah. I mean, I
Oh,
only kind of wish we got a little more time with him because like throughout, like I think a little bit throughout the episode, like the first thing that Roderick says about like what you have to understand about Prospero is basically that he's fucking insane. You know, there's that. Another funny thing when we think about it, so this character came across as very entitled, as if he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. But what you learn in this episode, and also they reiterate and hash it out even more later on, is that he didn't come out with a silver spoon.
yeah.
So Roderick is very proud of the fact that he didn't discount his bastards. He embraced them as opposed to his own father who rejected them. He's very much just like the door is open to all my kids. Um, but you know, I think they said that like not all of them know right away. Like, their mother will eventually tell them, hey, your dad is this guy. If you want to go meet him, go ahead. And then once they do, it's like a path to corruption, which even Prospero, who goes by Perry, I believe,
Yes.
um, puts in there, like in his rant after right before he tries to stab somebody, or no, it's right after, I think, stab somebody with a fork about the gall eggs. He talks about how he feels like it was actually lucky that his father and his aunt did not give him his nest egg on his pitch, because it was just a way to hold him on the thumb that once you're given that money, you're like, it, it
Right.
gets worse and worse. So he'd much rather plan his plan on his own. So even as nuts and kind of silly as he is, he got that right away, which I thought was really kind of insightful for such a monstrous character.
I I was finding the beginning entertaining when they were with the regulatory agency. just just because I'm like, oh, I've been on that side of the table.
But it
No,
also was proof positive, like, I don't know that he really didn't understand, as opposed to he really just didn't give a fuck. Like,
I think he
and I
did
think
give
he
a fuck.
just had such a belief that, and not wrongly, that the family had so much money and so much power that even admitting liability was just fucking irrelevant. Like, it wouldn't hit anything. So they're
Right.
at this table, and it's like him, his older brother, who's a legitimate brother, Frederick, and the attorney Pym, and they have like six EPA attorneys there, or whatever, regulatory
Some
compliance
sort of
attorneys.
federal regulatory body.
Yes. And Perry's going through this file, and like, they're talking about, violations, and he's like, oh, hey, do we own this house? Because if we own this, I'm interested in this. You see his brother's face just contort with rage, and him just like roll his eyes, and like, the one who's, are you admitting that you ownership? And yep, him going, of course he's not admitting ownership.
as as somebody who was trained to yeah and to be prepared for FDA audits, I'm watching that. I'm like, oh my God, shut the fuck up! Don't say a fucking word.
Everything you shouldn't be doing if you want to like deny this kid
Yes,
was doing it, just blatantly
yeah.
not caring, until his brother's like, let's leave the room and I'm about to kill you. And also keep in mind that there is the current bounty hunt on the alleged informant of that might be turning coat, and talking to the feds or whoever is currently prosecuting the ushers for various infringing. I think what was it, they were looking at for pill mill, or I think it is, and
Um, I
illegal
I
practices when it comes
well,
to.
yeah. What I liken it to is the Purdue Pharma trials. That's kind of what I draw as a parallel with that one.
Yeah, nice.
In the similar that they were for, yeah, for creating essentially the addiction
Yeah,
overload.
you were
Yeah.
knowingly giving this out to create an addiction. So yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So Frederick is sure it's Perry that's the, well, they call it a mole, and everybody keeps correcting everybody a mole, because mole is somebody who sneaks inside,
Yeah.
plants themselves, whereas an informant is somebody who's already inside and just informs. So you get that little background, and you see this animosity where one Frederick is very rude about Perry's legitimacy or lack thereof. I think he says that their dad fucked a blackjack dealer on a yacht so hard that it cracked the estate into six instead of five, or something. That's the only reason you're here. It's very crude. Um,
But true.
yeah, but yeah. So it's not a lot of, and then also later on, you really get the facts that basically there is a definite rift between the legitimate children and the illegitimate children, and there's even more of a rift between sort of a generational gap. So between like the younger bastards and the older bastards, sort of. So,
Yes. Everybody's
um,
at everybody's throats. Really. I don't, yeah.
well, I really love Perry's rant too when he's with his brother, and he's like, I'm like the bastard's bastard. I'm like more bastardy than me. Like, I'm
That's a great
extra
line.
bastard. It was very like funny, and actually it does give you some sympathy towards Perry, but he's just such a dick throughout it that you're just, I mean,
That thread of sympathy don't go far.
it doesn't go far. And like what you have sort of got lost when he, like, I don't know, I thought it was the creepiest scene in the world when he was basically trying to convince his sister-in-law to come to the orgy. And I have no idea why the sister-in-law even.
Grossed out by that. I was so grossed out by that. Because I get the feeling she's more like at least our, late 30s, early 40s, but closer to our age than his age. At least
Yeah,
let me put it that way.
like
And so
his
I'm
daughter was closer to his age than she.
like, ew, ew, ew. It just grossed me out.
My thought on that is that Frederick is such a
There's
twat of a person that maybe there's at least a little bit of a could I get back at my husband a little bit by sleeping with his brother, and especially this brother that I know he really doesn't
really,
like.
Yeah.
yeah. There's definitely in her opening commentary to Perry when he like calls Frederick fuckwater, dickwater, some I forgot what, but it doesn't matter. Where she's like, I get it. Frederick can be hard even on those that he loves. There's definitely an implication that he doesn't treat her the backstory as a little judgmental of her, or
he's not. I
yeah,
mean, he's a rich man. He's not going to.
Yeah.
yeah,
I think he takes her for granted a lot.
I'm sure.
So I think that there's that maybe I can stick it to him by doing this thing. I think is more the temptation than like him as a person. It's who he is and what he represents. I
Yeah.
think is the
yeah.
only
It's
sense I can make of
scene,
it.
then you think she's kind of a little more into him than not just.
I was gonna say, yeah, later you kind of think, oh wait, no, she might actually be into him, which is weird. But I guess to
And I
each their
apologize
own.
for this,
Mhm.
It's fine.
but yeah, I agree. But yeah, so and I give Prospero this. What he planned and what he was executing, first of all, I don't think they could do it in that period of time, but it was a good money making plan if you have that kind of resources. Like
Right.
he was not.
Yeah, it was. And
And
the also uh, there was you saw a glimpse of forethought with Prospero in this when he's looking at the security cameras.
yeah.
Oh,
And
oh yeah, no, he had a big game plan. It was devious and awful, and but genius in its own way.
Mhm.
Like it was a true capitalist.
yeah, it was capitalist and that's the word I'm looking for. But he was using his contacts to, get capital over them, literally, um, to be able to hold it against them when they were part of his whatever it was. I mean, brilliant. Um, from what I know of Camille, his sister, I feel like the two of them probably should have gotten along a little bit better. Because she's the one who does their tech empire, and
Mhm.
God knows she
Well,
should have
she
been in
was their
on this.
misinformation queen more than anything, as McNeil
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
But actually, you get the impression that they actually did not get along.
I was gonna say, I
Um,
don't think they anythinged each other more than anything. I think she didn't consider him any kind of a threat to her, and
yeah, she was one of the bastards. She didn't care if he was extra bastardy or not.
no,
It's just like yeah. But
She had her own empire, and he didn't register in it.
yeah. Other than something she'd have to
Clean
usually
up.
probably had to
either
spend
apologize for or
to
use
spend.
to her benefit.
Yep.
Mhm.
But so the plan, for those of you who don't know, was that basically he was going to have an exclusive pop-up rave. Um, and so exclusive that you have to one pay to be on the list even to get the invite, and then once you got the invite you had to pay extra to actually show up at it, and you wouldn't know where it was until you got the invite. And they had of course this clever red mask icon, and he takes one of the buildings that he thought was perfect for it that he saw while they were at the EPA meeting, and this is where he's kind of stupid.
Yes.
Like they're saying that these sites are possibly going to have toxic contaminants and all this stuff, and he doesn't listen to any of that. He just hears it's a building that was probably used for something that it shouldn't have been, and he's like, "It's fine. We'll have a rave there. We'll hook up to these tanks that are on top of the roof because it's probably filtered water that they use."
I'm like, oh no. You know where it's going.
Yeah, like we all knew where it was going as soon as he said that. Meanwhile, while he's looking at the building and scoping it out, you see little flashes of the lovely woman behind me was not in the mask at the time, but he just sees her standing on the roof and nobody else did at the time. And then, he pulls his party off. I think they got it ready in less than 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
I believe it was
In the
supposed to
way
be.
of good raves, yeah. Like, because you don't want to plan too far in advance or else it'll get busted. So, no, yeah, 24 hours pretty much. But it seemed to
And
me like he's the kind of person who had the kind of contacts that you need to do
Yeah.
that.
yes. Well, and it was he did pull it off until the critical point where the sky opened up.
I will say one of my favorite scenes. Oh God, I love this guy. I think it's the guy you like that's hot, the video
Leo.
gamer. What's his Leo?
Leo.
So he
Drug
goes to
dealer?
see his older brother Leo and for drug connections, which is hilarious because first of all his brother's like, you don't bring it, you bring dealers to it. Most people will be carrying their own stuff. I'll give you the name of three dealers. You don't want that on you. They're at your party, they get busted. They were just dealers at your party. You don't do the dealing. And he also asked for Viagra, which is very funny. And Leo's like, you're like 20. You're like 80% cum. I could smell you. Hilarious. And
I
then
died at
it
that.
was funny. It was a lovely scene. It was like one of my favorite scenes because it was just so fun. Like even the whole thing, like, no, I don't have Viagra. I'm a fucking stallion. And he's like, of course I have Viagra.
Yeah,
I'm doing my
remember?
business. Of course I have it.
It was very cute and very funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, so cut to the rave, and like right before we see Frederick's wife, and I can't remember the character's name, which makes me very sad.
Yeah.
My brain is doing, but she's a gorgeous woman, and she's
Hold
in
on.
this gorgeous dress, and she's getting ready to go. And her cover story is that she's going out with friends to support another friend who's having a bad time. She doesn't know when she'll be back, but she will be back, before like the
Her,
next day.
her name is Victorine.
No, Victorine was the
Yeah,
sister that
that's
had the heart mesh.
Or was
yeah.
it? Okay,
Yeah,
hold on. Morella?
that might have been it. Guess it must be Morella. But anyway, the whole time Perry's also like, Sweaty Freddy gets this woman.
Yeah,
But
it's her.
she goes out the house with this nice story that they get to the rave. There's these lovely high-tech rockers, lockers, no metal, no this. You just have this band to let you in. You see Perry back behind the scenes with the video cameras that everybody mentioned, where you can see that his real scheme is not the like, couple million he's going to get for having the rave, but for the money he's going to be able to extort later, or the resources he'll be able to extort later by having all these people on video. To because you got like politicians' daughters draft picks for this. You've got implied politicians that are
I was
there,
gonna
like,
say, is that? Uh-huh.
huh?
Oh my God. Yeah.
But then he focuses in on his sister-in-law. And like, okay, this is where it gets painful for me. Like when he first comes up to her, it's okay because he's sort of nice. But then he's like, I'll find you later. But the
Yeah.
second time when he walks up to her, like after our mask lady shows up, and like he just is like, yeah, and walks by her, and she just does this awkward dance. It hurt me in my soul. It was very painful to watch. It was
Yes.
very well acted. Let's put it that way. It was very well the awkward girl at the party that thought that the guy was coming to talk to her and then turned on her, and you just don't know what to do with yourself when that happens kind of moment. Yeah, a lot of empathy hit for that.
Yeah. She obviously knows she doesn't belong there. Like that's a she's been invited, it seems exciting, and then she gets there and she's like, "Oh, this is not my scene." Like
I am mistaken.
I could have told you that, girl. What did you think was gonna happen? Like he said the words orgy or the word orgy.
Yeah, I don't think it was that. I think she thought that maybe if she showed up, she wouldn't be alone. He would be around her. And then that clearly didn't happen. So then she was just awkwardly there. Yeah, I think she was clear on what it was going to be. I just didn't think she thought she'd be like kind of alone in a corner trying to, which you should always expect to be alone in the corner where you're being invited to an orgy if it's not your scene.
What I'm saying.
So
He's not
yeah,
the type to babysit you.
no, not a lot of empathy there from that kid. But I do love the visual of when we have our Raven walk into the crowd. It's just like, the music kind of stops, the
Oh,
camera's on
it's
her,
beautiful.
this flowy moment with the cloak behind. And yeah, and then you just know everything's gonna go to shit for one. It's you just are waiting for the punchline, really.
I mean, truly.
Yeah, it's true. It's
Chalk has
oh,
opinions on it as well.
You know what,
Um,
Chunk? I agree.
it's very understanding. You'd probably be very happy at orgy, Chalk.
there's
Or
people
he
out
might bite stuff off
there.
of people. But yeah. So yeah, so the party's there. They had this rule that Perry put in that nobody sucks or fucks until the water comes down, basically. Um, he
We see
catches
people
sight.
doing it.
I know you do, but I
Yeah.
guess you couldn't do it on the main floor. You had to go into
Oh,
the
on the main floor.
bedrooms.
That would make sense. All right.
I don't know what the real rule was. That's just something he put out there, but he follows, of course, our Red Death here into the room, and there's a really lovely scene. I love that whole moment she takes to like sort of seduce him even more and like explain how she really likes the bad boys. Like to her, there's so much
Right.
fun. And but still implies to him there's time for him to back out of this.
Yeah,
Right.
very much
You
so.
can
'Cause
stop
she was,
this.
yeah, she was warning him. She's like, actions have consequences, and she was trying to drill that home, and he just chose to bulldoze over those. So,
Yeah.
such as it is.
And then, the other thing you have to think about is like, in a way, she gets the innocents out of there. So, like the staff, the bartenders, the, people that were
Yeah.
circulating drinks, they are suddenly compelled to leave. She goes by Morella, the sister-in-law, and it's like, go now. Morella stupidly doesn't go. And I'm just going to tell you this, people, PSA, if at any time you're in any situation where somebody creepy looking is like, go now, fucking leave. Especially
Run
when you
the
see
hell
other
away.
people like staff going out the
Yeah.
doors.
Bugger
Don't
out.
argue. Get the hell out. Which I think she was sort of meandering towards the door, but I think she got pulled where she wasn't sure if she wanted to go to Perry first and then meander out. I'm
Right.
gonna meander out. That's who I am.
I'm like,
Fuck
send
boy
him
can
a
die.
text later. I go.
But she didn't. And you don't find her fate in this episode. You find it in later ones. But meanwhile, the water starts and
Water.
screams ensue. Terrible, horrible screams. Flesh melting off flesh. And it was gross, but I think they did it well. Like it wasn't
Oh,
unnecessarily gory, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
no.
it was like it was. Yeah, it they didn't focus in. There weren't extreme camera close-ups. There's a lot of overarching camera work on that. Um, and I've seen a lot gorier special effects like that. And this was fairly low key
I
for
was gonna say,
Franklin.
it was gross. Don't get me wrong, especially
Yeah.
there at the end when they do the focus in to show like that
Oh.
everybody's kind of melted together like a
Together. And
pickle
yes, I
puddle.
thought that was awesome and disgusting and beautiful.
Yes. Wonderfully well done and bleh, at the same
Ugh.
time.
Yeah, it was bleh, but really good. Bleh. That moment is great. And when she kisses him, ugh,
Oh,
Lovely.
yeah.
it was so good though, because she's like, goodbye. Mwah. And I'm like, who
Oh,
is
That's
who is this
dedication to
woman?
your craft.
yeah. And she just kind of wipes his extra flush away that got on her lips
And then puts the mask on him.
and walks out the door. But Rebecca, I want to tie you back into you were talking about the heart mesh thing and Roderick where it comes out.
Yeah,
Did you want to revisit that since
not really.
okay. But it is interesting that I'm glad you did bring it up was basically you do realize that Roderick is basically battling vascular dementia and that real-time monitoring about from that heart mesh that you'll learn more and more about could possibly extend.
Right.
Slow the progression.
Another scene that I really, really liked, even though it's awkward as shit, was the minute that Roderick leaves his granddaughter with his new wife. And the new wife is explaining how she met Roderick. And she's like, oh, I was in this horrible car accident and I lost my leg and I was on so many drugs. And they brought him in and he was like, hi, I created that drug. And I was like, oh, I'll blow you right now. And I didn't.
And she's
And I'm
like,
like,
and I,
Just kind of
and I was
realizes
dying because
it
she
was
realized
awesome.
you could see the look on her face when she realizes I have overshared with a child. Okay. Oops, my bad.
you know,
But props to Lenore, the grandchild, because she was just like, okay.
All
I
right.
see. Well, that's interesting.
Okay.
Like, you felt like she felt awkward, but was not shocked. Like, this child has not been all that sheltered. Let's just put it that way.
I
Was the
don't
impression.
think he could be sheltered in that family.
Probably
No,
not.
Yeah.
no.
And I also think you would have learned the value early on in keeping that polite, calm mask on your face.
Yeah. But you're right, a fun scene. And we also have the scene before that with Auntie Madeline, where, basically she's creating a AI version of Lenore.
Ugh.
And then goes on to this rant about like how they mummify because immortality. That's what, they're all after.
Yep.
It's interesting because Roderick's way of immortality is just trying to knock up and have as many children as possible, which is ironic considering later
What?
on things that are
Yeah.
revealed.
What we
And
what we
then
will find out.
and Madeline's apparently is just her algorithms and her AI and her legacy that way, or
Right.
actual immortalities, which is genetic immortality.
I also I like the scene this time where you start to realize how messed up this family is, which is the scene with Tamerlane and her husband and the girl. So what you thought was happening when they kept saying, we don't have the girl today, what I thought was it was some very weird sex thing. I'll be honest. I thought they were like inviting a third in, which they kind of are, but
That might be
it's
a weirder sex thing than you
so
thought.
much weirder than what they, because basically they bring this girl in and she treats the husband like a real wife. They have
She basically
conversations.
acts as Tamerlane.
Yes, only because Tamerlane can't be that person. Like she doesn't have it in her, and then Tamerlane gets off on it, which is the wildest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. But it's a wild scene. But it starts to show you like just how broken these kids are. Like even the ones who are like the legitimate kids, because I think Tamerlane and Frederick are the two that
Yep.
are the legitimate kids. Even the ones who are legitimate kids are not right. Like no one in this family is in the peak of mental health. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's a wonderful visualization of how the rot is carrying through the line.
The
I also
corruption.
appreciated that the one time that they went to Camille, she was watching Tamerlane's husband's workout videos
I think
and
she had a
going,
thing for him, but I don't know. I mean, you tell me in like the next episode when we talk about it, but I kind of think she's enjoyed Bill. Let's put it that way.
I think so. It's a I just think they do such a good job in this show of slowly showing you that all of these people are so flawed and so messed up, and it's probably the fault of the parents. Well, parent,
The dad. Yeah.
dad. This is
It's
mostly
Roderick's fault. We're just
I
gonna
would
it's
call it that.
Roderick.
I would say Madeline is sort of quasi-parental in this,
She is.
because yeah, because I see her influence is going to be strong on it as well. Because honestly, between the two of them, between Roderick and Madeline is clearly the dominant. I feel that
I mean,
she
she's
is
the
more
dominant
driving
twin and
things of it.
she's smarter than Roderick and all this stuff. But
Yeah.
as far as raising the kids, though, I believe she's involved as an aunt. So not so much the main parental figure, but I mean, don't get me wrong, I agree that like corruption does come through her as well. I mean, you get that when you see Perry pitch to the both of them.
Right.
you know, whereas instead of being supportive Auntie, she's like, this is the shit you give us, Auntie. You know what I mean? Like, so,
That was great.
there's definitely part of it, but I think the main influence is still going to be Roderick.
I kind of get the sense like she might be like the disciplinarian, if that makes sense. Like she's the one who eventually comes in and is like, no, this isn't good for the family. No.
Yeah, yeah.
I
The
think
bottom
that's
line.
kind of her.
Let's call it
Yeah.
the bottom line.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I would
So
agree.
Roderick kind of tries to tread the line of being both negligent and buying them with money. And then she comes in and is like, no, you can't do that. That's where we draw the line. Yeah. That's kind of the feel I get, especially in these first couple episodes. And I honestly, it's been a minute since I watched this, so I'm watching them again as we're doing it. So I can't remember, but I think that's kind of the feel I got through the whole thing is that she's like,
Well, she's in charge. She's definitely the dominant.
oh,
Like you get
she's
that right
definitely the
away. And
dominant.
we'll keep, I mean, even the first episode where she was the twin that was like, we're gonna go see this, go see our dad and climb the fence. And she was the one that like, snapped at her dad when he was grabbing her mom, was like, let her go. She was the one that like came up with a plan to go to him to try to get help for their mother. Like yeah, she's the planner. She's the dominant one. She's the force behind the curtain,
Yeah.
for sure. Definitely. Like you can get that. And
I think
you're right. I think it does become much more abundantly clear as the episodes go on, for
yeah.
sure.
And you see that in this episode too, when they're showing him giving the pitch and her being like, no, you don't take no for an answer. Like, you can't do that. And then her like rolling her eyes because he's obviously like the ideas man because like he's writing poetry for his wife and she's like blark and she's like no, you take that idea and you push it, like you don't take no for an answer. I don't know what you're doing, like you're wasting this. You have to take the bull by the horns, basically is what she's saying. And he's like, but I have my wife and I have my whatever, and she's like,
No, 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 no. You don't
But it's also
understand.
where you see she's not very much the loving auntie. You don't see her try to take the kids or hold them or interact with them in any way whatsoever.
no, she honestly, I was like, I relate so hard to her just smoking her cigarette and being like, I hate you guys so much.
Yeah.
What is this thing? What is it? Why did you
It,
do this?
it's
It's making a
making
lot of
noise.
noise.
Make it shut up.
Like you did it twice. Why? I don't know.
It's touching me. Why is it touching me? Like,
Yeah.
So yeah. But any more thoughts?
I just love it. I do. I love this series. I just enjoy it.
I enjoy the
Um,
timing and how they're piece by piece by piece, the story comes together.
yeah, I do
Yeah.
like that it's like not necessarily linear. That we're
Yeah.
getting little bits and pieces of little bits and pieces. And the further you get in, the more you're like, oh, okay. There's a lot more to this than meets the eye for all of these people. Um, I do. I really like the series. I think they did a really good job. I like Poe. That's it.
Yeah. I should have taken the time to reread the story before this, but I've been swamped.
Um, I'll have to revisit my paper. I found it not too long ago, so I'll have to revisit my paper because I'm positive that I did something about the incest Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher from this paper. My final for that particular English class, where I even like partially diagnosed what disease they might have had because of the incest.
Yeah, like I said, I did reread, but I skim read it, and like I said, I think the implication of the incest was probably so embedded in there that I just kind of skimmed over it because I was just kind of getting it. But
Well,
um,
it's one of those times where since we're so far removed from it, we might, if we're reading fast like that, we're going to skip over the obvious cultural references that
yeah,
the contemporary reader would have understood.
Yeah.
quite possibly, definitely. And but I will say, like I said, the 1928 version kind of follows it okay, except for like the weird painting thing. Um,
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that's what the director had a problem with, was the weird painting thing.
I'm pretty sure it had to have been.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of because the rest of it was fairly
I was gonna say it was
on.
fairly on.
And not calling out that Madeline was his sister. That would be the only two real, very,
I was gonna say, and even that again, they really heavily hinted at. I was laughing because he was like, their family tree is like a brambly, snarly mess, which I was like, oh, it's a wreath. I see. Because if you looked, it looked like this on the thing. I was like, yeah, that's not good.
unhealthy, not
No.
at all. But yeah, but yeah, I agree. I really enjoy the series on Netflix. The cleverness of having this overarching story while keeping extra post stories in the middle of it is a lot of fun. The interpretation they did for the Mask of the Red Death instead of disease, especially we're in the middle still of a pandemic that hasn't gone away, an endemic now. It was a nice departure from having to think about that and just see death spreading quickly through a different means. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
they kept the trueness of what happened in Mask of the Red Death, but put it in such a different way that it was fun. I love Madeline. And she's vile but wonderful. I love how you like her true cleverness and intelligence and diabolicalness, gets summed up in just one scene when she explains about the one foster home, how like, Roderick would rant and rave and get locked in the closet, and she just was like the best friend to the foster mom, helping her how to sort the books even better until she was ready to hand her over on a silver platter to
Yeah.
children's services. And I love the cleverness of it. And you know you're going to see more of her and more of her planning in the end. Like
I
it's just
like a good, complex, and not entirely likable female character because she's hard. I mean, she's a rough character, and we've seen her make decisions that were like, that's not a good thing to do. But it doesn't make her not a good character, not a well-developed character. She's a very
Mhm.
well-developed kind of self-serving person, and usually they don't let women be that. Because women have to be likable, and she is not a likable person. In fact, most of the women in this are not
Or not.
particularly likable, which is amazing. I love it. I love a series where these are beautiful, kind of horrible women. Like, like, all of them are a little deplorable and have like a little bit of a like Tamerlane is off the charts on just being kind
Weirdness.
of bitchy and horrible. And then Camille is like a shark. And even uh Victorine, who is, a doctor and she's trying to do good, is also very self-serving because she wants her funding and she doesn't want to lose it. So she'll do whatever it takes. All of them have like these major, major character flaws and are very complex female characters, which I love about this series. You don't get a lot of one note characters. They're all very complex and not
I would say,
necessarily likable.
yeah. Well, it's mostly the sons are the least complex ones. It's interesting. Like there's not a lot behind the Perry character. There isn't a lot behind the Frederick character. There isn't a lot behind Leo either. Like they're all very much, even Roderick, when you think about it, he's mostly money and dick driven. Like there's just,
Yeah. It's
which I don't know what they're trying to say with that. Like men aren't interesting enough, or we just have to make,
or
I don't
it's
know.
that the women in this environment have to be that way to thrive and survive.
I mean, it could be just, yeah, that the women have to prove themselves, where the men would get this no matter what. Like, Frederick was going to be given on a silver platter this industry. He's going to be the golden child. He's going to take over. It was his to lose. So Tamerlane builds her own business and has to be a bitch and
And
take
put a man
over.
as a front. Keep that in
And yes,
mind.
and put a man as the front because she knows that nobody will support her if she's in the director's chair, which is the same thing that Madeline's always done. She's let Roderick be the face of their industry while she's the backbone of what they do. And I
It's
think that that's interesting that they're showing like these men can get it just because they're white, like they're men. And these women have to work really stupid hard to prove themselves. And some of them harder than others.
Well, and then you have Juno, who she doesn't seem complex,
No.
but you feel like there's something more there.
The
Like
the wife.
yes, the
Yeah, the
wife.
wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like they don't go a lot into her right away, but you know a couple things about her. You know that she used to be a heroin addict. You know
Mhm.
that she is on the highest dose of Ligadone, which is their basically oxy, that anybody has ever known of, and is still like functioning normally, basically. And you know that basically that's what Roderick loves about her. Like, don't get me wrong, he's enjoying sex and fucking somebody young, but his appeal, the appeal she has from him, it's basically his monster. Um, and she's like his poster child. When anybody says, "Oh, Ligadone is terribly addictive and it's doing this and it's doing that," he points to his wife, who's like, this
True.
is like why she's there. And you don't know a lot about her, but when you hear her speak, it's kind of this innocence. Back to that funny story where, she just blurts out how exactly she met Roderick. It's innocent, like the way she tells it. She's not thinking about it until after she stops and she looks and it's like, I'm about to tell his granddaughter that I blew him the day I met him. You know,
Yeah, there's a bit of I don't want to call it a naivete because it's obvious that she's lived a life, but it's also obvious that she comes from a totally different world than what they come from, which gives her a bit of an innocence. It does, because I don't think she comes from money. That's implied. And they're constantly saying, like, you're never going to inherit. I don't even know why you're here. And it's obvious she's there because I don't think she's used to being cared for at all. And even though his care is not great, like, he's kind of dismissive of her sometimes and whatever, it's better than being ignored. And I think that's kind of what she's used to. So you kind of get that feeling that there is more to her, that it's like, yeah, but what I'm used to, like, I was a heroin addict.
There
This
is.
is
It's
better.
yeah. It's very much. I mean, she's a big time fish out of water,
Yeah.
and that's part of the, like you said, not naivete, but just awkwardness of her character.
Yeah.
She doesn't belong there. She knows it, but she's staying there. So
and I
she's
wonder
choosing
too, do you
to
think
go
that
with it.
maybe it's a little bit like that even though the value he places on her is really twisted, the fact that he sees her as valuable, I think might be a contributing factor to it.
Yeah,
You know?
I agree.
I
Yeah.
feel like he does. Yeah, I know.
Even if what he values her for is for her ability to attest to his drug or whatever, it's being valued and being wanted and feeling wanted by him.
So it's powerful. It's terrible how it affects us, but it's powerful when you haven't spent most of your life being valued and you suddenly are even, and like to be fair, I don't think Juno understands why she's valued by him. I think she just feels valued at this point. I think it comes clear later when he, lets his mask down and is just an obvious prick. But, I think at this point in their honeymoon phase, she doesn't know. She just knows she's valued by him. So,
Right.
and then you have Lenore, who is just like, where did she come from? You have her mom apparently is it's not a bad mom. She looks like she's kind of good. And when you see the interactions at first with her and her dad, they also seem pretty standard and stable and not too awful. And
I don't think that her dad doesn't love her. I don't. I do think that he's trying so hard to be what his dad wants him to be that he can be neglectful. But I don't think that he doesn't love her.
no, I
I
thought
think he
that's
treats her like his dad treated them, which was with a tiny bit of neglect. Just my job is first. I want to take care of you that way, kind of thing. But
yeah.
he seems to try at least.
Yeah, I mean, like when the wife, her mother left for the night out, they're sitting there building a ship in the bottle together. They're obviously
Right.
interacting on a more normal level. And then you also see from a grandparent level, Roderick is very much comes across as very typical doting grandpa. And
Yeah,
even
He,
Madeline comes across as a doting aunt figure to Lenore.
yeah.
When you
And I think some of that is the implicit goodness of Lenore. She comes across as someone who
brings out the best in others.
brings out the best in others. Yeah. because no one seems to be mean to Lenore. You know what I mean? Like even the meanest of the siblings isn't mean to Lenore. She's different. She's special to them for whatever reason. And I think it's they're just trying not to get her into the petty squabbles, but it works and it makes her kind of a figurehead of the sweetness of what can be in this family. Like you can have this normalcy, but not from them.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. But we'll see as the fall continues, right? So, yeah, with that, definitely watch the series, guys. If you love Poe or even like Poe, you're gonna love this series. You're just
Or
really gonna love
even just a good mystery series put together, even if you're not judging it from the Poe aspect, it's well put
Yeah,
together.
absolutely. Yeah, even if you're not familiar with Poe and you just like to watch horror stuff, it's really, really good horror series. So do the thing, watch the thing, and watch the 1928 silent film. It's free and it's lovely. You can just sit if you want to put on your own music. It doesn't have to be the music that they have there. Put on your own music, sit and watch it. Visually, it's stunning. It's very goth. Um, it's very, haunted. I'm like, I bet they've used this in music videos because it was very haunted. I'm like, somebody has to use these images somewhere. I know
Oh,
they do
I bet you. I bet you.
because it's very beautiful. So yeah, watch it.
it. All right. Well, with that, anything else, ladies?
Nope, we're good.
Mm-mm.
All right. Well, then good night or good morning or whatever. And thanks for joining us. And stay tuned because we're going to continue with our Poe Travaganza for the next 6 months, basically, because there's 6 more episodes. So, again, we might take periodic breaks and throw something else random in the middle so you don't get too Poed out, but maybe not. You never know.
Yep.
So, thanks. You've been watching Girls Go Schools, and we're happy you joined us.
Bye.
You have been listening to the Girls Go Schools podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Girls Go Schools Podcast, on Twitter at Girls Ghost Pod. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Girls Go Schools Podcast, and find our podcast on your favorite podcatcher.